There are two types of Nintendo fans. The ones who only play 2 or 3 of the big hitters and hate everything else, and the others who won't shut up about one of the company's many dead franchises. I jest, but what I do not jest about is the simple wasted potential that Nintendo sits on sometimes. Now, their big series got there for a reason, but who's to say that the other games couldn't also excel? I looked through many franchises that lay dormant and picked out 3 that have been forgotten about. Do they need a revival, or is there a bigger reason why the series is no more? I tried to vary the generations of games and picked out a good spread to talk about here. The only criteria I picked is no recent games. I used the mid-2000s as a cutoff. I know there are people that call franchises that haven't had a game in 5 years dead, but clearly they're not a fan of Startropics. Startropics is a series I knew about since my time on the internet, basically. I was one of those kids who kept my ear to any and all Smash Bros. Leaks, speculations, reveals, and all that jazz. I first heard of it hearing about the protagonist, Mike, people wanting him in the game and whatnot. Continuing forward though, I did not play the game but knew it to be a certified cult classic for the NES. People clamored for a series revival, something like Kid Icarus Uprising, to hit the same highs. Of course, we haven't seen that yet, and the series is still stuck with its single entry. Except there was a sequel, 4 years after the release. I feel like that alone speaks volumes to how quickly the series faded. So, what is Startropics and why do people like it? Released in 1990 and made by Genyo Takeda, we see an action-adventure game make its debut late into the console's life. Takeda is also widely notable for the Punch-Out series as well. This seems to be a little bit of an outlier in terms of genre swapping, to say the least. The reviews are overall pretty solid, and well, you know the rest. It held a pretty strong standing, however. Fans would also refer back to the saying it was an underrated classic. So you boot up the game and, well, what do you see? Protagonist Mike Jones is visiting his uncle in
the water.
On the aptly named Sea Isle, you arrive and find out that your uncle is missing. The game becomes a search for said uncle. Spoilers, it was aliens. Aliens took him. The game has 8 chapters taking place with 2 styles of game at display. On the overworld, it's an exploration and puzzle-solving type beat. The game takes a page from classic RPG, specifically Dragon Quest. I mean, the comparison is quite apparent here. You talk to townspeople and find secrets, solve riddles, you get prepared for your dungeon explorations. The dungeon delving is the main game here, as you explore in a style that is easily compared to The Legend of Zelda. Nothing quite controversial either. It doesn't take much to see where the similarities are. There are quite a few differences, however. Given a yo-yo for your defense, you move around the room taking out enemies and solving many puzzles to progress. Mike moves on a grid. Movement needs to be deliberate. You can easily jump into a pit or an enemy, and you gotta get a feel for your surroundings in each room. Starting rather easy, the first dungeon gives you a nice intro and tops it off with a simple to understand boss. Each dungeon gets harder with their own quirks to them. Items are here in dungeons, from health to extra weapons. They have limited uses or ammo, so use wisely. Unfortunately, they disappear upon dungeon completion. Sucky, as I would love to stockpile some potions. Fortunately, the items needed for progression or help against the boss or enemies usually lie in the dungeon they are needed. The dungeons have varied hazards, pitch black, ghosts that are hidden, pitfalls, etc. The game is quite challenging, I must say. Not impossible, but I feel like some things are made to be brute force through trial and error, or maybe I'm just stupid. But I think overall the dungeon exploration is rather cool. It is a unique idea, to say the least. Story continues to get more and more out there. Every island needs to have the word cola at the end, apparently. This game really feels like a kid's storybook. You get help from dolphins, find some pirate ruins, get swallowed by a whale, and of course, stop an alien invasion. You meet up with your uncle before the end of the game to find some alien races trying to do nefarious shenanigans with the help of these 3 cubes. We infiltrate the spaceship and collect the cubes, all while fighting off the leader, Zoda. Zoda? Zoda? Is that the joke? Cola Islands? I don't really know what the whole message is. I don't know, probably soda equals bad, but that's, I guess, rather unimportant. The last levels make a huge switch up in the visuals. Get a laser gun to fight off robots and aliens. I do dislike this a lot because it kind of took the dungeon exploration and made it unfun. You die a lot trying to find the right path due to the progression working like the Silk Code building in Pokemon. Add that to the infinite enemies and you will lose a lot of health. The first fight with Zoda is okay, but the last fight is kinda odd. He transforms into a giant alien and stomps in a similar grid fashion to you. Of course, he takes up much more space and will one-shot you if his skin brushes upon yours. You win, go back to the islands, and the cubes revealed to be capsule holding together an alien race, the Argonians. They were previous victims of Zoda, and they remain as the last of their alien race due to their father and their king saving them. They stay on the island in happy end, and then Mike shoves some bananas in his ears. This game is unique and got its charm for sure. I can imagine being my shit if I grew up with the NES. I cannot find a specific reason, but it seems like sales weren't always the best. The sequel was divisive for reviews and probably sold worse. Many also said it at the time of the reviews, but it clearly was going to be overshadowed by Zelda, it even being referred to as a Zelda clone by some. I couldn't find stats for sales, but I imagine people would rather just play as Link. Another aspect we see with modern day is that it probably would be very difficult to transfer this 3D grid-like environment. The gameplay would have to be a lot different from the grid-based movement we see. Even now playing, I'm sure many could see the design as, well, archaic. Some of the exploration is that NES-level crypticness, like not just pointing the finger at the code they required you to input from the manual? Like, I get that they were the jam in the day, but giving crucial tips and lore and whatnot, but wow, this is a mechanic that did not age well. It just hurts more too, knowing that most physical copies don't even come with a booklet, as is. I guess the booklets were a product of its time, I guess. It's stuck in an era, so to speak. Speaking of stuck in an era, how about some radical 90s? 1080! Game I have a lot less to say about is 1080. 1080 is a snowboard racing game. It is quite easy to lay out. What shocked me more is it being a Nintendo-owned franchise, even with Miyamoto himself working as a producer for the game. It released for the N64 in '98. Similar to Startropics, it got a sequel for the next console, but sold less and reviewed worse off. 1080 held a good amount of rep when it dropped though. This game has had the most history with me, as I had it in a box of random N64 games my family was given. I remember playing it, liking it well enough, but was bad at it. Going back to this sent me for a nostalgia trip, not just as strong as some of the other games in my childhood, but you get to pick your character, you snowboard, and play a variety of modes. Now, a big put-off for me, especially as a child, was the fact that there was a lot of stats that my child brain could not comprehend. Racing game experts probably don't notice or care about all those stats, but I mean, I wasn't used to it when I played it. The main event I feel was the racing mode. You go 1v1 against the CPU to race to the end. Go down each track and the slopes get more perilous, and honestly, it takes a second to get the hang of the controls. My early gameplay here looks so terrible, so I apologize for that. Got the hang of it eventually, and was able to beat the first race. The levels try to be a little bit more varied, but let's be real, there is not a whole lot you can realistically do with snowboarding. They gave it an honest effort though. There of course is time trials, multiplayer, and a trick mode. This works similar to something like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, going for the many type tricks up your sleeve. You get points and try not to wipe out. The interesting thing for me at least was the health bar you have, especially in the racing mode. You crash, miss a jump, or hit your opponent, you take damage and eventually will die? I mean forfeit the race due to sustaining too much damage. I think that's a cool and unique concept for the very least, but I don't know if it's ever been utilized in other games, because my racing game knowledge starts and ends with Mario Kart. One big standout as a kid and what I retained was the music. Music is kind of banging. It really gets that 90s vibe. If the radical character and announcer already didn't hit you, these tracks are actually quite fun. I hate the first two though, mainly due to the amount of times I had to listen due to my ass getting whooped. Did I mention I suck? 5 years later, the sequel, 1080 Avalanche, was dropped on the Purple Cube. It got lesser reviews and didn't really make the kind of impact the original did for the folks at Nintendo. That is the last we would see of this series until the Virtual Console and Nintendo Online releases. A shame too, in all honesty. Now, I am not the core demographic for these games, but I think Nintendo expanding the range of series to meet a diverse range of genres is only a positive. Aside from Mario spin-offs, there isn't really a long-running sports game. Racing games clearly don't have the same issue, but I don't even think there's a larger competition for snowboarding series. Now I understand it may be a little bit more niche than even its cousin similar of skateboarding or even just classic sports like baseball. But the only other series that I feel has notoriety would be SSX, which hasn't even had a game in over a decade either. Maybe this type of game was simply a product of the time. I really feel that 90s era really ran parallel with these type of extreme sports. But hell, there's always room to innovate and make a new entry fit to more in tune for the vibe of that new Nintendo audience. How would they do that? No clue. I'm not the guy for that conversation. At least has a uniqueness to it, and there's no room I feel that another Nintendo IP could overshadow 1080 if it ever came back. It's not like it has to go up against a monolith like Kirby. The largest and most releasing out of the three today is the Starfy series. This series debuted on the GBA in 2002 and had an unfortunate 7-year run. Specifically though, I will be talking about the legendary Starfy, which is the fifth and last game in the series. For the non-Japanese audience, that was a one-off game as the first four never released outside of Japan on their respective hardware, well, not until the online came around. The reasoning for ever translating them over was a classic. The developers thought it was going to be too Japanese and would not interest Western crowds. Well, I guess they decided to give the fifth game a go, and it released on the Nintendo DS in 2008 for Japan and 2009 for the rest. The release was a fair gamut. I mean, the DS, that shit sold, so it makes sense. It released to decent reviews and sales seemed to be pretty good for North America, while Japan saw the lowest sales in the series on debut. Since then, it came and went, and I knew about it due to my siblings playing the game. I enjoyed the hell out of it, and thought it to be somewhat of an underrated gem. Going back to this game now, does it hold any water? The whole game is focused around water. Get it? Like starfish? Please like my jokes. The common comparison is Kirby without a doubt. The reviews stated this as well, of course, and it's easy to see why. Starting off, the character of Starfy is a relatively basic design with not too much to make him hyper-detailed. The platforming stages are not as big of an emphasis on jumping and trying to dodge pitfalls and whatnot, and more of an exploration, puzzle solving, and defeating enemies. Transformations are here too, which can be linked to Kirby. Even the personality of aloof, cutesy main character whose lack of any major activity in their brain being replaced for this godly power. Starfy and his best friend Mo are chilling when a space rabbit falls from the sky. Being pursued by unsavory sorts, Starfy protects the bunny and they escape the assailants. Recovering a mystical shard reveals the bunny's name to be Bunston, and the crew travel to various locales to regain these shards, as they clearly are linked to Bunston. You'll be able to fuse with Bunston for a variety of different transformations. The first one is a dragon that breathes fire, for example. They change the gameplay when used and can be utilized in a lot of different ways. There's a large amount of collectibles to get too. Secret exits with extra stages nearly doubles the game level count. The pearls you collect with Jack the Ceiling and the game's currency are used to buy a bunch of cosmetics. Some cosmetics are retrieved in stages and don't do much for Starfy's sprite, but the main menu, a 3D model showing off the DS's power, is where you really can dress up your Starfy. Along with these, there are journal entries providing more lore and a bunch of mini-games and side modes to use it on. These vary in enjoyment and some utilize the transformations, so I guess that's pretty cool. The main story is rather short, especially speeding through the levels, another similarity to some Kirby games. You keep fending off the reoccurring enemy of the Terrible Trio, who eventually get fed up with the tyrant of a boss ordering them around. Getting all shards reveals it to be Bunston's spaceship. He actually is the prince of a planet named Bonera. It was taken over by this usurping Mashtooth. He wants Bunston's power, as being prince gives him uber special abilities that Mr. Tooth wants. You head up the space and confront the villain. The final levels are rather neat. Being on the moon was something I did not expect, but 2 out of these 3 games ended in space-themed places. Didn't really plan on that. Also, I didn't unlock all the tracks in 1080, so maybe the final track was the moon or some shit. Don't know. Anyways, the final battle is rather neat, multi-phase of a fight. It turns into this 2D space shooter where you have some Dragon Ball Z style face-off at the end. Once the pirate is beaten, the friends all bid farewell as they return to their respective lives. Once again, in the same vein that Kirby, this game is rather focused on a younger audience. The story and characters are rather basic and nothing is really that hard. Playing as a semi-adult age has not had me feeling the same I did as a kid. I had some bouts of nostalgia, but I really feel like that game was honestly a tad underwhelming. Much like with Startropics, this franchise was clearly overcast by a series that shared some aspects that was just one of the big hitters. Kirby was already huge before and after and had the staying power that Starfy didn't. Same with Zelda and Startropics. Whether the team felt the series was done or not, this was the last entry in the Starfy series. As with the other 2, there is definitely room for a revival. I think some aspects could be tweaked, and changing up some of the gameplay would be necessary, I think, to stand out a bit more. I keep harping on the similarities, especially with these, but I think there's enough room for coexistence here, especially if they do something else. I think an attempt could be made for any of these 3, but obviously it's harder as the gaming industry moves forward. Taking a gamble is a lot more of a time and money investment than it was 2, 3, or hell, even now 4 decades ago. I think a variety in more games could be good though, and show some Nintendo fans some patience. Trust me, coping with the dormancy of your favorite franchise forces you to look outside and try to find other games to fill a gaping void. God knows there are some of these fans that could use a bit of diversity in their gaming libraries anyways. And look, I made it to the end without any jabs at the Mother franchise. Yeah, Mother 3 should be properly localized and all, but that series is finished per the creator, which is why I felt the need to omit an obvious candidate. Clearly a Mother 4 is not going to be necessary. However, Golden Sun is a mystery to why the hell they haven't seen anything more. Yes, in fact, this entire video was a ploy for me to constantly reference the need for more Golden Sun. I will never shut up about it. How many copies do I need to buy to justify this creation? Okay, I'll shut up now and probably just end the video. Alright, but seriously, with the rise of RPGs, especially JRPGs, I think this is a perfect opportunity to get back into the franchise. Look at the Xenoblade trilogy. Final Fantasy is still huge. Dragon Quest XI is amazing. Persona and SMTs continue to impress. Look at Metaphor ReFantasio. Even this year, Clair Obscur is a clear love for the JRPG formula, and I think it's insane to say that this game would not sell. The HD 2D series has a great sales, and you could also go that route, or try a completely new art style. Look, I'm just saying it's a pun intended, a golden opportunity to do this game.